Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's video is about finally finishing off the engine bay, installing the new skin fittings and Seacocks, packing the stern gland, and is proudly sponsored by marineengine.com. The first step in finishing off the engine bay was just ripping out some of the old stuff I didn't need, the old hot water system and the remnants of the old dry exhaust. Next thing I'm going to do in the engine bay is get the hot water heater out. There's the tank itself and a whole lot of pumps for it. It's run off the coolant, but it was never plumbed in. So I'm going to get it off so I can clean this wall. I also need the room to get round to the front of the engine to do sort of essential maintenance. So to me, better access to the engine when it's in situ is worth a lot more than a small hot water tank, to be honest with you. So I'll take it out, I'll store it somewhere, I'm not throwing it or anything, but I just don't need it yet. Then down here is the sea chest, I'll show you. So this is the one that came from overboard, so it could draw water from overboard, and then it can discharge water out here. So you could either draw from the manifold or draw from the skin fitting here, and the water always went out into the wet exhaust. So we've got pipes, one to the forward compartment. So this pipe goes backwards to the lazarette. This one goes forward, I think all the way forward to, good question, where to? Possibly all that's really forward is the anchor well, because the one down there goes into the cabin, which is below the wheelhouse. So I think they were the only 3 compartments. I'll go and check that at some stage, but what I need to do in the meantime is just disconnect all the pipes so I can get the manifold itself out. So let's just start unbolting. Alright, it seems to be coming apart, which is good. One. Let's go. Top spinning on this one. That one's not behaving so well. I'll try the bottom one first. Alright, all 3 pipes, well 4 if you include this one, are disconnected. 5 if you include this one, can't remember where that went. It may have actually just been down to be the pickup for the engine bay bilge. So ultimately it was protecting 4 separate watertight compartments. Anyway, bolts on here now, and we'll get this out. Alright, out. What I need to do in the meantime is find caps for all these pipes so that this remains a watertight bulkhead rather than allowing water to fill the engine bay, then flood down through here, fill the cabin. So need to find some caps at a plumbing store or something. By the time you finish a job like that, you realise it's actually going to turn out to be quite messy and you should have worn gloves. Oh well. What time is it? Cooper's o'clock? Let's check. Ah, look at that.
1 in the afternoon, definitely time for a beer.
All right, that's better. I feel like I'm getting back to my usual chipper self. Maybe it's because the weather's warming up. This morning it was still pretty cold, down to almost 0 stew, which is kind of roughly 15 Celsius or something. But turning out to be a nice day. All right, let's get that hot water heater out.
So far so good. I was worried these bolts would spin and I'd need someone on the other side of the bulkhead to hold the head of the bolt still, but so far it's just spinning the nut off, which is great. Quite predictably, the bolt on the final one is spinning. I'll see if I can wedge it to put some pressure on it. If that doesn't work, I'm going to have to run inside, hold a spanner, then run back out here and turn it. Nah, it's not going to work, is it? If you're lucky, sometimes you can get a spanner onto the head of the nut and then kind of get it wedged against something. But failing that, angle grinder? I don't know, we'll see. That's interesting. That pipe that I said maybe went to the anchor well, which I thought was really unlikely, seems blanked off. Looks like maybe it did used to go through up to there, but long since gone, that's okay. Down in here, probably can't see with the light, but that's the bottom pipe to help pump out the, the cabin here. But the good news is, yes, we can do it. They are the top bolts for that hot water heater. The good news is the bolt that's spinning is that top left one, which I can get to. The others are, the bottom ones anyway, are behind this carpet covered plywood, which I need to remove anyway, just for reasons of good taste. Then those 2 bolts are the panel. Looks like there's another 2 lower than this carpet, so hopefully they come out. Anyway, what I'm going to do is just put some vice grips on this top one. Alright. Those vice grips will eventually just wedge against the top of here and we should be able to get the nut off now. Undoing the nut, it's going to spin. So we actually need to come that way, don't we? Alright, let's leave those there. The great thing about going through and, checking all this stuff, now I realise this is just blanked off on the other side. I can take this off, put the bolts back in to hold the blanking plate in place, and then I've got another bit of bulkhead I can bolt something to. On a boat this size, you really can't afford to waste space, so figuring out everything that can be pulled out without losing any functionality is just definitely a win for me on this boat. Alright. Getting too lazy to walk up and put things out. Alright, these 2 are behind that carpet. Those ones can come out. And these ones, just give them a tap. Yep, that's got them. Alright, ready to start grinding. Great. Also here's an old, long defunct, some sort of Morse cable, possibly the engine shut off before they put a solenoid in. Gotta say, I kind of like the reliability of these Morse cables for engine shut off. I'm almost tempted to put a new cable in instead of the solenoid. We'll see. Good solenoids are pretty good. Just gonna knock this bit of flexible pipe off the end, then we'll be able to push the solid pipe up. There we go. Out. Alright, needs a little bit of cleanup, but it's good. This is still all in position and ready for a proper dry exhaust install. It's a lot of the work done, which is nice. Up here, we've still got a similar arrangement through the roof, but I'll deal with that later. Now all the grinding's done in the bay, just getting the loose stuff off, then I'm doing a sugar soap wash on all the paint that I'm painting over. In that process I found a few spots that need a bit of welding, so I'll do that and then we're ready to put primer on. I really should block up these holes in the deck where I've taken fasteners out, shouldn't I? Last week I pretty much got the engine bay finished. Wasn't much worth filming, lots of grinding, lots of painting, pretty dull stuff, but got there in the end. So this is what it looks like. Got to get some fittings for the fuel outlet and the fuel lines coming out of here, clean those up a bit. But got the back bulkhead here cleaned up and everything kind of painted. So now I've got to get these skin fittings in. Skin fittings, the old wet exhaust outlet and the stern gland packing are the only things between now and this boat being fully watertight, which is cool. This particular fitting, compared to the others, you can see it's kind of eaten away at an angle here compared to this one, which is fine. This camera keeps getting bong eye or something. Sorry. So to fix this, I'm just doing a bead of weld around here, chipping the slag, getting in with the flap wheel to clean it up, do another bead, keep doing that, see how much I can fill this gap up with weld. While I'm waiting for that to cool so I can chip it a bit, it's probably worth mentioning I worked on this boat all week, then I did the ROV video on the weekend. And you know, you definitely get a mixed reaction to not showing, you know, the project that's happening. But when the boat's on the water, the plan is to do a lot more diving, underwater search, that kind of stuff, as I've said. I think ultimately though, what doesn't change is the flavour of a channel. So my plan when I do that is to show you guys all the details, you know, not just the pretty pictures of fish underwater or wrecks or whatever, but to really go through, you know, what worked with the equipment, what didn't. Are we going to make a reel for the tether for the ROV? You know, how deep is the Raymarine side scan sonar going to be effective? You know, we'll obviously have to go to a towed sonar at some point, even though it's great having a built-in one in the boat, you know. So the channel will evolve, I've got to say that up front. Some people aren't going to like it, some people are going to love it, you know, whatever. But one thing that won't change is that we'll always be detail focused. You know, I'll always tell you guys exactly how we got things to work, what we're planning on changing, listening to the advice you have. You know, regardless of what projects we're currently doing, you know, that'll be the thing that you can count on being the same. So I hope that sort of explains a bit what to expect in the future. Anyway, time to get back to welding. Probably gone round now, I don't know, maybe 10 times with some 3.2mm rods. So going to get on the top here with a grinder and smooth it all off. This is where we're at now. A little bit of slag entrapment here. Doesn't surprise me, I wasn't particularly careful about cleaning each layer as I went. But it's certainly a much better surface for the flange to seal onto now than it was before. You know, it was right back to here. There was quite a taper on this one. Now the engine bay is pretty much painted, I'm going to start installing all the skin fittings into the hull. Now, as I said, the original one, I used this PVC one just as a test fix. It's the right diameter, but the real ones I'm going to be using have arrived now. These ones are made by TruDesign and they're perfectly good for using below the waterline. A lot of people commented about using plastic fittings below the waterline. These are a composite material, very strong. In fact, they've got a stronger impact rating than bronze does, so they're definitely up to the job. On top of that, they exceed the ABYC specification, which is that you need to be able to hang 500 pounds or 227 kilograms off the very tip of the tail downwards for at least 30 seconds. I'll show you. So here's the fitting installed. You've got the through-hole fitting, the load-bearing collar, the ball valve and the hose tail. Once it's all installed, you should be able to put a force perpendicular to it of 500 pounds hanging down for a minimum of 30 seconds, and if it can do that, it passes the ABYC specification. A lot of people commented saying you can't use plastic below the waterline, and clearly that's not true, and I think this is a great option for a steel boat. You've got no corrosion problems with the fittings themselves, and you've got no dissimilar metal problems as well as being more than strong enough to do the job. I think a lot of people sort of have their heart in the right place when they say don't do it, but I think the trouble is people just haven't kept up perhaps with, you know, what's available now in the way of composite materials. So this is a fibre reinforced material like a fiberglass hull is. Here there's some specifications. So we've got a 1.5 inch skin fitting and a 1.5 inch ball valve. So we need to have a hull thickness between 24 millimeters and 48. We're actually quite up near the top end. It's about 48 millimeters thick, the hull with the two, you know, reinforcing flanges. So what we need to do is we need to put the skin fitting in, dry, put the nut down, and measure how much thread is remaining. 20 millimeters minimum, 32 millimeters maximum. All right, put this in dry. I'm just going to pop it in. This one's a relatively tight fit, so it'll probably stay, but then I'm just going to wedge it in with this ruler. All right, we've got sort of 23, 24 millimeters, so we're above the minimum. It also means we don't have to trim these threads. If you end up with too much, you do actually have to trim the threads off with a hacksaw or something. So I think we're right just to install these and wind the ball fitting all the way down on them. I'll undo this skin fitting and we'll reinstall all three of them with some Sikaflex sealant on them. This skin fitting is going to go in quite a way, so you don't want Sikaflex coming past this distance up, but I'm going to do all these threads here and the bottom of the flange, put it in, then we'll fill any gaps with more Sikaflex and tighten the nut from the inside. I'm going to do all three of those exactly the same from the outside, then we'll jump back in the engine bay. Okay, here's our three skin fittings, all poking through. What I'm going to do now, particularly with this one, is just fill all this gap in here with Sikaflex, just to flush with the inside of the hull. Just a good wipe round, clear the threads a bit, push it down in. Now, washer down. These flanges are completely flat, so I'm just using these flat washers. If there's quite a curve to the hull where you're putting it through, you can get washers with a curve on them that sort of matches that curve, which gives the locking nut something flat to lock against. The instructions are to just make these finger tight, then let the Sikaflex set, and then tighten it another half turn. Tomorrow, when the Sikaflex is set, we'll come in, we'll turn those locking nuts another half turn, which they say should be about 15 Newton meters. Then we will install the locking collars, the ball valves, and the tails. Now, Thursday, so boat's going in week Friday, so what have we got, 8 days to go. What I'm going to do now is put the ball valves in, so I'm going to use a bit of the Teflon tape. They talk about a few different sealants in the instructions, but the thing I like about the Teflon tape is it's going to make it easier to remove should I need to replace the valve for whatever reason. So I'll put the tape on, we'll put the ball valve on. Speaking of instructions, what's interesting is that the fundamental instructions for installing seem to only come in the package for the load-bearing collars. Why that is, I don't know, because you can use them without the load-bearing collars, but anyway. I'll show you those collars now and how they work in conjunction with the ball valve. So this is the collar here, and you can see on here it's got the ABYC H27 rating to 500 pounds, and the collar sits in it, so that the handle, I think it's right, there we go, it drops right down, and there's a cutaway so the handle can still turn. And then here is another cutaway for the other side. This is the ball valve I'm using. So it says install with a maximum torque of 12 foot-pounds. Use Teflon tape as the sealer, and it's a glass reinforced nylon, the material, made in New Zealand. Okay, so I'm going to start over here. We'll put some Teflon tape onto the skin fitting, and then we'll wind the whole unit on together. So the idea with this collar is it fits right over the nut, and it gives you quite a load bearing area. It gives you quite a big flange size. Then we're dropping the ball valve onto the thread and wind it on. So to complete the installation, we've got a tail fitting which has a BSP threaded fitting that goes into the ball valve, and then we've also got a barbed tail here that we're going to put our hose onto with some high quality T-bolt hose clamps rather than the dodgy little worm drive ones. The plan is to come straight up from here into the inlet side of a C strainer. We didn't have a C strainer before, so I'm going to have to mount up some sort of bracket to put it on here. Alright, one really important job on the list before this goes back in the water is to pack the stern gland, so we may as well do that now.
The original bolts for the stuffing box got damaged when I removed it, so I just bought a bit of stainless threaded rod and made up some new ones to replace them.
First step, I'm just going to drill out the paint from the holes here on the stern gland and get it ready for the threaded rod to go in. I'm just going to put a bit of grease on the threads of this threaded rod before I put each one in. So nut at the front and the back around the flange. I've already greased the inside of the stern tube here before I push the prop shaft through. This here is a brand new stuffing box. The other one was quite rusty, so this one was made by DH Porter as well when they checked and straightened the prop shaft, etc. So I'm going to put a bit of grease on the outside before we install it. But first I'm going to cut this packing, which was 1/2 inch packing, so quite large packing. I'm going to wrap it around this part of the prop shaft, which doesn't run on anything, so the razor blade's not going to damage it really, but it's not a part of the prop shaft that runs, you know, in the stuffing box, doesn't wear or anything. So if we do a tiny nick on it, it's going to make absolutely no difference. So we'll wrap around here, cut it here. Another good tip that somebody mentioned in the comments previously was just to hammer along it to flatten it out a little bit. Makes installing it easier. Then eventually it'll swell back up to its original size, particularly when the stuffing box is compressing along it edgeways. There we go, that's our first ring in. Now I'm going to start staggering the rings. I'm staggering the joins around, so this join is here, the other one was on the top. Now we'll move it round to the bottom. I'm going to tap the stuffing box in a little bit to compress that, because I'm not sure whether we're going to fit 3 or 4 rings in. I've got a funny feeling 3's all we're going to get in.
Might need to back these nuts off here so we can extend the studs ever so slightly. Get some nuts on and compress that up. Still the last week of winter at the moment, but it's definitely getting hot again. I'm not going to go nuts on tightening these bolts until the boat is in the water and we got the shaft rotating and a whole lot of stuff like that, but it's fundamentally in there. I got 3 rings of 12mm or 1/2 inch packing in there. I've got another ring pre-cut, so I'll keep that aside. I've actually still got a whole spare packet, which will of course live on the boat. So I think we kind of can call that done for now. What I will do though is put the prop shaft flange on with the key, the flange, and then I'll put the coupler on just so it's all in place ready for the motor to arrive. Also for me now, it's just making sure things don't get lost, to be honest with you, just knowing that every bit that's critical to the operation of the boat is on the boat, because we're now, I think, exactly 10 days from launching, so really it is the kind of the final countdown, and I just need to really start ticking all those boxes. So big job for tonight really is going to be making a list that we can start ticking off in these final 10 days. These are 19mm nuts, so I'm thinking I might grab a couple of cheap ones and then just tie them on with a cord somewhere so they're always here for the stuffing box. Alright, now in the meantime, put a bit of grease on here. Key back in. Washers and our nut. All that time ago you may remember when I air chiseled this off, so I'll have to see. I mean, obviously we've got couple of holes here so I can get a face spanner or something and tighten this up, and then from memory there was a locking screw in through here. This is our polyflex coupler that goes between the flange from the prop shaft and the output flange on the gearbox, but looks like because of the thickness of this I'm going to need to get some longer bolts for it, so that's okay, I'll find some of those. Well, we can officially say the hull's watertight now for the first time in 6 months at least. So, you know, that's a nice milestone. Got about a week to go till we launch it. So next week I'm going to be focusing on the electrics. A couple of mates, Dylan and Leon, are coming down to give me a hand. And we're going to get all the batteries hooked up so I can at least, at a minimum, get a couple of bilge pumps in before we launch the boat. All right, well, take care and I'll catch you then. See ya.